Hello, hello.
Wonderful to have you here.
Thank you. It's such a privilege. You know, financial Sherpas. Hey, no small
Very beautiful.
matter.
Very
Wow.
beautiful. Very beautiful.
Uh,
Yeah.
Your profile picture, Chene, is so beautiful.
Oh, the one with the door.
Oh, with that dress and where you are, it's just like,
Yeah.
oh, it's beautiful.
Yes, yes, yes. We did video recordings for self-discovery process, and
Oh,
my daughter-in-law was my camera person, and so she said, let's invite. This is what would happen. So I had workshops at my home forever because I've got a small conference center. And then she said, well, people must feel they're coming into your home, though. And so that's the story.
yeah, but
beautiful. It's
yeah,
beautiful.
but I was thinking about it. I would not call it a conference center. It's actually a part of your lounge that you
Yes.
invite one
Yeah.
in,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah, it's
and it
true.
and it's such a lovely experience, even thinking back, So yeah, I was thinking
Yeah,
about it.
you were like the virgins one. you and what is her name? Lisa.
Lisa Marie that worked at Momentum at that.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. You were the
yeah,
first one
yeah,
saying, we want to learn this.
yeah.
Yeah. Inauguration. So therefore I cannot not say yes, eh? Allegiance to those that were first.
It's so lovely.
Yeah,
That's so nice.
yeah, no, it was wonderful. So yeah,
You've got a
yeah.
very reflective look on your face. It must have been lovely because the way that you have this like softening when you were remembering.
Yeah, we were doing restaurant hopping in the second phase.
So what were you doing? Are you going to tell us now, or was that more for the
No,
conversation? What was that about?
sure it's part of Hendrik's story, but this is my version of the story. Is we had a little bit of conversation in my house in this lounge setting, and then we would just go for lunch and choose a restaurant that would be appropriate for the conversation, because space is everything. Yeah. That's what I remember. We had 2 days.
Yeah.
And I said, what do you want to learn? And that's what we learned.
Oh, nice. Oh,
Yeah.
beautiful.
Something like that, huh? That's my story about the memory of those times.
Yeah.
That was 2012, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't think it. Yeah. Yeah, it was about 2012. Yeah. And so much happened since then. So yeah.
I'm telling you, and there you're sitting all like freedom, independent.
Yeah. No, when you say that, I was so shocked this morning. I was just just looking at some comments, and they were talking about all this wokeness and freedom when you talk about that. And somewhere in Scotland, some charity has decided that the Tigger that came to tea, that was written in 1968, the storybook, is now offensive and it's a violation of women's rights and children should not be exposed to this. And we're like, the Tigger comes to tea and he becomes the Tigger's friend. I mean, these are like, I remember reading that story. And then the other one was at the Globe Theatre, which when we were allowed to travel, I used to go to. Romeo and Juliet is now on, and now they've got a warning that there's drugs and violence because Romeo. So now it's like a warning for children that that maybe they shouldn't be looking at this.
There we go.
The world has changed. It's like there is
art has walked into the commercial field.
So there is no freedom anymore because someone's already going to decide what you're going to read, what the children are going to be exposed to, how theatre is going to be, how it's not going to be. I mean, what's the freedom?
Yeah, and the paradox there's two things that comes up for me is, you know, the whole thing of how thick and thin is your story that you build those stories on. And
Correct.
what is the context for those for everybody. Yeah. And then you know, that big thing from you know, if you look in the East, it's all about community, and in the West, it's all about freedom of speech. And you know, where in between do we create our stories that we live in? You know? So yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
No, it's just
Hello, Ignu. And Sharon.
Yeah.
And so Susan, where are you? Which space and place holds you?
so space and place right now holds me. So I'm in KZN,
Ah,
in Westville. Spaces, I'm a financial planner,
yeah, yeah.
and just doing the journey of making sure that our behavior and our clients' behavior all mixes together so that there's good conversations about money.
Mm,
So it's the curiosity of the human interpretation of all conversations.
yeah, indeed. Ah, fantastic. KZN. Marguerite, welcome. Where are you calling from?
Morning. I'm from Cape Town. Sorry, I saw I was on mute. Good morning, everyone.
Hi,
Cape
morning, Marguerite.
Town. Is it as cold as it looks in terms of your clothes?
It is cold and wet. Yes, we've had lots of rain.
Oh, fantastic. Yay. The dams are full.
I think our dams are overflowing.
Oh, fantastic. So great to hear that. It's a relief in the climate emergency conversation to hear that it has returned after
Yes.
7 years.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Igno, you most probably on your phone.
Ah,
Because it
Hendrik.
does look if your wife and family took over your technology.
Hello, Renate.
Hi.
Hi, Alta.
Grandad.
Goed.
Fantasties en lekker om jou hier by ons te hê.
Great.
Hi,
Alta?
Sharon.
And where
Sorry.
are you calling from? Alta and Renata. Sorry, I'm gonna do the space and places thing. Yeah.
I'm calling in from Nelspruit right now.
Ooh. I lived in White River for 10 years. So
Okay,
I
great.
always have a very warm place in my heart. We raised our children with birthday parties at the Macmac pools. And
well done, yeah.
and on their own, they moved all the stones at the Lone Creek waterfalls from this side to the bridge to that side of the bridge. We just sat for a day. We fed them, and the whole day as small children, they would just take the stones this side and throw them that side. So it's a long story to say, great memories. And you, Renata?
I'm from
Ooh,
Joburg. Yeah, I'm from
Joburg.
Joburg, yeah.
Welcome. Wow. Oh, there's Ignu. Hendrik, I think you were
Yeah.
right about the phone thing.
Yeah, hi everybody. Sorry, I was just stuck. I just need to figure out audio on a backup laptop quickly. So I'm on the phone and on a backup laptop for the moment. But good to see you, Chene.
Great to be here.
Hi, Hendrik and Chene. Sorry, I'm also on my phone because I'm going to be driving probably halfway through your discussion, and I would love to show you my face, but I can't actually access the camera. I have to switch off completely and reboot up with Zoom on my, because I think I've cancelled the video on the app itself. I'm trying to connect with my laptop quickly, and then yeah, but I'm from Cape Town. I'm sitting in my kitchen, and my dog's sitting next to me, and he might be very loud in his snoring, so I'm going to try and mute most of the time. And yes, and I'm also a financial planning coach at Old Mutual, so spent the last couple of years trying to work with coaching and financial planning, and how that looks and how to connect the dots. And it's been interesting and challenging and but very exciting. So yeah, that's where. And we're using narratives. We're using narrative coaching in the training that I do at the moment. And I think it might confuse everybody a little bit, but I do believe that it's a little bit more powerful than just using money scripts, because you're designing a narrative for each of your clients and they can connect with it, resonate with it, see themselves in it, and then, shift if they need to into something that's new for them. So yeah, still playing around with it, but I'm dying to hear what you have to say today.
Thank you, Sharon. And the others, Robin, Louis, Alice, Mary, where are you phoning from? Just to get me a little bit of a sense of who's in the room.
Hi, Chene. I've been following you on LinkedIn, so very honored to listen to you today. I'm a certified financial planner, and I've just finished or completed my ontological coaching course. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, and where are you phoning from?
Oh, I'm from Joburg. I'm not sure if anybody else. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I live in Park next to the Kruger National Park.
Privileged. Thank you.
I'm Robin Clay and I'm calling from Cape Town, Chene. I'm working with Hendrik and Alta a little bit. We've developed our platform called Hardida, and we are offering a behavioral finance tool there called Money EQ at the moment. So I'm learning about coaching, and I really am coming from the technical platform side. I'm not a financial planner and I'm not yet a behavioral finance coach, but it's an area that I want to learn more about and ensure that whatever product we sell via our platform speaks to what I'm finding is we run an assessment and a report, but I think we could enrich that. So I'm here to learn more. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin.
Hi, Chene. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Louis.
I'm Louis. I'm a financial planner in Durbanville in Cape Town that enjoy the human side of money. So anything that's related to that piques my curiosity, and hence me being here. Thanks to Hendrik.
Thank you, Louis. Mary and Ferdi. Yeah.
Hello. I'm in Cape Town. I'm a financial planner and coach. I also run a coach training school. And yeah, anything to do with this topic and the side of the growth of financial services industry is really fascinating. So excited to be here and hear where you're going to take us today. Go on the journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Hi, I'm gonna discuss today. Thanks.
Ferdi, we didn't hear you.
Sorry, I think my internet broke up a bit. So I'm also from Bloemfontein, and I'm just excited to listen to what you're sharing today. Thanks.
Thank you, Ferdi.
So thanks for that, Chene. So, and creating the space for us and doing it wonderful, like always. Myself and Chene, we were talking just before everybody came up onto the call. We probably know each other here from 2011, 2012, somewhere there. A good common friend, Franz Wastijn, introduced us to each other. And I then journeyed with Chene in terms of a narrative work, and I found it very useful. And there's still some of the stuff that I use just as she tried to taught us way back in my work, specifically the conflict management. I still use it just as you I think you trained us in the ocean basket on that one. On that one, so that was wonderful. But I think the story that I want to tell this morning was before I went and did the coach training with Chene, was I consulted with on a session. At that point, I was provincial manager at ABSA, and we wanted to roll out something new. And I consulted with Chene, and she helped me with the structure to facilitate the workshop. And then she started, start with this story, ask this question, ask this question, ask this question. And I said, but by asking these questions, I would most probably end up somewhere else than where we want to go. And then she said to me, do you want to tell the people what you want to do, or do you really want people's voices in the room and learn from the people what they need and what the company need? And that was such an eye-opener for me. Is it my agenda or the people's agenda? So I still sometimes when I go into a meeting, is it my agenda, or am I really there to work with the client that's sitting in front of me? And so that's one of the wonderful memories I've got of working with Chene. And Chene can fill in. She can do it much better than I can do around her own journey. And then Chene will take us on a journey for the next part of the hour. And thanks very much. And it's really a privilege to have you here, because you're definitely one of the shoulders I stand on, and helped me on the journey up to where I am today. So
Thank you. And we were talking before everybody was in the room, and I said, if Hendrik asks me, I cannot say no at all, because they are mutual shoulders. If people show up in your life and they say, well, they want to learn something, there's a message that you have something to teach. And so now you have to say yes many years later. And a great privilege. Thank you, Hendrik. So at the end of the 90s, I was stuck in a story in my own life. And as a child, I read a lot of psychology books. So I thought I got it all sorted. No problem can get me under. But alas, this problem story got the better of me. And a good friend of mine in Durbanville invited us for dinner, and then said he found this new kind of therapy. Am I interested? I said, I'm desperate. None of the stuff works. And he asked me these kinds of questions. And he said, this is called narrative therapy. And it was so liberating for me, the first time in my life, that a problem was not centered inside of me, but a problem is something that I'm in relationship with. And problems are also created in a larger context. Man, that was revelation. I went on a journey. How can I study this thing? And here in South Africa, there was a psychologist, clinical psychologist, and a theologian. Bloemfontein nogals, and Dirk Kotze. And he had a deal with UNISA. And so they provided a master's and a doctorate in practical theology, specializing in pastoral therapy. So I jumped from a music teacher degree to a theological degree, and thought I'm going to do therapy for the rest of my life in a small room with one other person. And then I met Johan Harold, who was at ABSA, Organization Development Consultant, at a synod meeting in the Walvissaal in Hartenbos. And he said, so lekker to have this wonderful privilege of South Africans in the room, because usually I can't tell the story like this, because people will, Walvissaal, what is that? But anyway, so I'm there, and Johan says, tell me about this narrative, like a good OD person, want another new thing in my toolbox situation. And I told him what is narrative therapy, and he said, he's got this OD team at ABSA, come and teach them the ideas. And I'm like, yes. And what is OD? because like overdose is the only thing that came to my mind. And then he said, no, it's a real job. Organization development consultants, they're in the forefront of the change in organizations. And so the story of Yes started to unfold. And I never got to the small therapy room. And for the rest of, it's from 2005, my work has been to translate these ideas of narrative therapy. So narrative therapy started at the end of the 70s in Australia and New Zealand with two social workers that looked at the way people had conversations with those in the helping professions and how they were always talked at as people who don't have any resources, don't have any knowledge, don't have any ways, even practices in the art of living that they could bring. They were like subjects of help. And they, around a kitchen table, developed narrative therapy. They would have meals, read philosophy, cultural anthropology, post-structuralism, literary theory, critical pedagogy. They would read all of this stuff and say, what does it mean for a practice? Or they would do something new and say, are there some philosophical ideas that would support it? And what is great about narrative therapy, it's not grounded in individualist psychology. So it has the basis of philosophy and anthropology, and therefore it's also applicable larger in communities and organizational life. So there's a couple of us across the world that is busy with narrative coaching or narrative consulting work in organizations. So what is it? We believe that human beings are story makers and meaning makers. We do it anyway, all the time. So things happen to us, and then we say, oh, so what does this mean? And we start weaving. Does this say, maybe I can show you a slide. Can I share my screen?
Arletta, just check if
host
not,
disabled. Yeah, you have the power, brother.
There you are. You are enabled.
Oh, thank you so much. Share screen. Okay, come on. That's always for me the biggest dilemma. I now have to find the slide. Okay, let's see. I'm going to close and then open again. Share screen. There you are. Fantastic. Okay, fantastic. So what happens if you think of all of these crosses as moments in our lives? So we think, when we think of story and narrative, we think that a moment is the smallest unit of experience. I remember when I first, in my development of the story of Yes, said yes to do leadership work. I remember the poor leaders are shame. They were so gracious. I would say, tell me a story about your leadership. And in the West, people totally freak out. I don't have a story. It's only the people on the African continent that really have good stories to tell or are good storytellers. And then I met a narrative therapist that also specialized in interpersonal neurobiology. And he said, a moment is the smallest unit of a story and the smallest unit of experience. And everybody has a moment. Nobody can defend against a moment because you all have them. And they always come with a qualified, it's nothing special, you know. So the invitation is always tell, and then the next iteration of the question was, tell me, and now in financial services, we can also translate this. Tell me about a moment around your finances that would help me understand what you value when it comes to financial planning. I'm just making up. I don't know if that would be a useful question in your world. So again, tell me about can also stay here, very heady. I can tell you my opinion about my moment or my analysis or summary about my moment, but I'm not there. And then I read the work of a philosopher at Stanford in a book. Hans Ulrich Gombrich spoke about the production of presence, what meaning cannot convey. And he said, how can we, my translation of what he says is, how can we help people to stay in the moment and not to depart from it too quickly so that we harvest all of the riches of that moment. That people just pause a little bit longer. And in the process, you also help them to tell the story. So the question then shifted to take me to a moment and really take me there. Who is there? What happens? What are you smelling, seeing, hearing, feeling? Is there nature in the moment? Is there beauty in the moment? And those kinds of questions are super cheat questions. Hey, people say, I really love that. I really want more of that in my life. Then you're like, one way. Take me to a moment that would help me understand why this is so significant for you in your life. And that's one kind of question. So, okay, back to the explanation of the ideas. So all of these crosses, we can think of moments in our lives. And what happens is because we have this amazing capacity to make meaning, we weave these moments together. Then this happened, and then this happened, and I'm telling you about this moment, but I'm also remembering that moment. Moments have the inclination to put up their hands, and they say, pick me, pick me, pick me. But stories are a bit overwhelming in certain Western contexts. People say, I don't have a story, or a story means that you're telling a lie. So that's the first thing. Take us to a moment. And then as you ask that question, you see how people start weaving different moments collectively into their lives. And our questions are really ways for people to connect the dots that they otherwise would not connect. And I think our work is also that when people walk away from our conversations, they would say, I've never thought of it that way, or I totally forgot about that. And then weave their experiences in a way that takes them forward, that moves them forward. But we also have problem stories, hey? Oh, and this happened, and this happened, and then I start telling you about them. Oh boy. And by the time I get to you, it is a rich story. And it's no longer a story. Oh, it's morphed into a fact of my life, the way things always go and always are. And that we call a dominant story. It's become so thick that people think it's the only description of their lives. And then we have work to do. Because when people think this is my life, they also draw conclusions about who they are. They say, see, I'm bad at finances. See, we in the world have constructed society and I will never make it in this world. See, the world is greedy. So we take these moments, we have the capacity to weave them, and then we make conclusions about identity, about relatedness, and about reality. So as financial planning coaches, you step into that meaning-making system of people and their weaving capacity. And the invitation, I guess, you bring is to weave in alternative moments, alternative stories. I don't think they're necessarily new. They're always there, but because they've never been asked gorgeous, transporting questions, they've never been invited into meaning making. And that's for me the work, to invite the alternative. We call them alternative stories, counter stories, competing stories. They are moments that contradict the dominant stories of finance and our relationship with finance. They usually sound like this. There was this one time usually the sentence starts like this. There was this one time, or there was this uncle, or, but that was just once. But we all know when it comes to research, that when there's an exception, you have a problem. Your research starts all over again. Because when there's an exception, there's a possibility for an alternative. And people's lives are littered with exceptions, with contradictions. And our work for me as coaches is how can we notice the contradictions and ask gorgeous questions about them without telling people, oh, that's another story. You should do that. You should make that story richer, hey? Because then we become the primary authors of their story. We decide for them. So once we notice it, we can say, oh, this is interesting. This sounds a little bit different than those dominant stories. What about this is significant for you, or would you like to weave into your life? So that's the work of coaching. The other larger story that we work with is the context. Oh boy, and do you work in an interesting context? Man, you've got COVID in the mix. You've got changing economic systems in the mix. You've got Bitcoin in the mix. Oh, I could just imagine. So the larger story of the context that you work in, I always call the story of the water. So there were once upon a time, there were 3 fishes, an old fish and 2 younger fishes. And the old fish said to the younger ones, hey boys, how's the water today? And then they swam on for a little while and stopped and said, what the hell is water? And I think, and I know that a lot of the dominant stories, the dominant problem stories are supported by the taken for granted beliefs and ideas, by the water of the world. How people see themselves successful or not successful, good life or not good life. All of those constructions are made up. Oh, this is so beautiful. The work of Lisa Feldman Barrett. I don't know if you know her work. And she says we are the only species on this planet that have agreed. Oh, this is another thing that you're working with, that a piece of paper actually means something, that it actually has value, and that we keep on agreeing about that. And in that world, you step in with all of people's meaning making around finances and those pieces of paper and the borders that are drawn between countries and the artifacts of wealth. Is it property? Is it the house by the sea? What is the thing called wealth and finances? So it's an amazing time, I think, to be a financial planner where things change consistently and will change all the time. And so part of our work, so there are different maps in narrative coaching work. In narrative coaching work, there's a map. How do we separate from problem stories? How do we put people into relationships with problem stories so that they feel that they have authorship almost in that relationship? Because if problems are not inside of people, you are financially inept. That makes the person the problem. But you have a relationship to finances that influences your life in a particular way. Then I can do something about my relationship to finances. And so that's one of the maps in narrative coaching, is how can we separate people from problem stories in the way we ask the questions. And the practice is called externalizing or itifying. So we make the problem a persona and it. and we have a conversation with a person separate from the problem. So a question could sound like, when first did you notice that finances became a dilemma in your life? You put the finances. So the finances or the economic system or the success is another one. Oh boy, we are, I'm always thinking of the French Revolution, vryheid, gelykheid en broederskap. None of that is left behind. You know, we have interesting relationships to freedom, interesting relationships to equality, interesting relationships to our neighbors. So we itify problem stories, we give them names. So that's one map that we work with. Then we also have a map that thickens stories, that enrich stories, that we want more of. Oh dear, that was also another iteration of the question. So I used to ask leaders, tell me a story of your leadership that you are proud of. Every Christian country, that is a problem, because I'm not allowed to be proud, because then I'm proudful and I'm thinking that I'm better than other people. So that morphed into take me to a moment that would help me understand your relationship to leadership in a way that you want more of. Then there's no judgment, there's no preconceived notions about I'm better than somebody else. So it's the invitation of something. So I call it the stories you want more of map, the stories you want less of map, and the deconstructing of a context map. That's the other one. So if we then look at the water, what people take for granted, we also have to have a sense, I believe, of what do people see as the water? What is the context that they are swimming in when it comes to their finances? What are some of the cultural beliefs? Oh my dear, if we just go with all the sayings we grew up with around financial wealth. Geld groei nie op my rug nie. Money doesn't grow on my back. Hey, that's one of mine. You can just go to all the idioms around money and finances and wealth and rich. Hulle het met hulle gatte in die botter geval. They fell with their bums in the butter. That's the rich people. And that's not us. You know, so those, if you could just have, that'll be very fascinating to do that with you. To just, in your childhood, what are all the sayings that you grew up with that is the water that you are now working in? So a person says, I'm really struggling with my finances, but sometimes they're just struggling with all of those sayings of the water that they are part of. So those are the three maps that we work with. Narrative coaching is really a way of seeing and a way of doing. We see human beings as human becomings, all the way up, always on the way of becoming, not as an end result. Nobody on this planet can ever say, I have become, I am there. Because our identities are always in conversation with the society, context, relatedness. Our identities are always on the move. And then it would be interesting, what fascinating work that you are doing is, what is the financial identity that you are bringing to this world? So we are meaning making story makers. We make meaning through language. A word creates a world. And I don't know about your work, but in this country, we are 4 million mother tongue English speakers. The rest of us are always translating. And those things get lost in translation. And oftentimes I would say to people, is there a word in your language that would help, that would bring us closer to what you are meaning? So that it opens up, if a word opens up a world, I think mother tongue also opens up a world of understanding. Then I already said, because we're story makers, our story making capacity shape and maintain our identities, relationships, and realities. And for me, in narrative coaching, we want to set people up as primary authors of their stories, as the experts of their lives, where they're constantly being told, you don't know what you are doing. You are bad. You are making bad choices. Imagine that. What a revolution. If people feel that they have a pen in their hand when it comes to their relationship to finances, for instance. And in organizations, we are co-authors. I always believe that organizational culture is a sum total of the stories we tell about who we are. So because we are socially constructed, we have a multiplicity of identities and a multiplicity of authenticities. Okay, maybe we can stop there. There's a lot of practices also, but I just wanted to, because we're speed dating and I have to do magic, I thought let's take a breath there. And are there any questions so far? And Hendrik, how am I doing in terms of your request?
They're doing fantastic, Chene. So yeah, let's open the floor for questions and conversation, thoughts that perhaps pop up, what struck anybody as part of the talk.
Yeah, please help me here, because Hendrik, he sold you as stalkers, eh? So I'm betting on you, the Ignu.
I saw Alta had a hand up, so let's go with Alta first. Ladies first. She says I must go.
She's insisting.
Yeah. It's Women's Month, so I don't know whether to allow them or to listen to them. So that's so. What do you do? What I'd like to share, Chene, is the fact that with a fish in the water, I think the fish often forget that you have a high impact on the quality of the water around you. And so often we take the water, as you say, for granted, but we can change the water little by little, expanding. And then if we change other fish, they're also allowed to change much more of the water. So it's that whole fish tribe thing, maybe.
Yes. And I think that's the best case secret in the world, that we are told we are given this world. Although it's been constructed over histories, I mean, it was handed through a baton over centuries to us to this point. And the best sold thing is that this would stay like this. But every story that shifts and every relationship that shifts something in the water and with the other fishes. And so for me, if this is a made up world, the good news is it can be remade. And it just takes enough people. It doesn't take all of us, but it takes enough to shift something in the currents of the ocean. Yeah. Thank you, Ifni. Yes. Alta.
Yeah, thanks, Chene. It's really powerful, you know, what you're saying, even in terms of leadership. Because I think, you know, as leaders, we also, you know, we give the stories and the meanings. Every leader is a different leader because they come from a different perspective. And I truly believe we're all leaders. We just lead differently. And the thing about the meaning and the stories, I think there's so many money shame and money guilt stories that's running our lives. And I think especially, I think everybody in the room is from South Africa. So I think what we're seeing also around us right now, you know, with the looting and things, it's past belief systems that's coming up. You know, and it's really stories that's running in the mind. And I mean, we all got different stories and the meaning that we give to the different stories. But I think one thing is for sure, if we can change our stories and we can look at the opposite perspective and try and understand people, what is their story? You know, we can we can shift, and we can do that one shift at a time, and that's how we transform.
Yeah, thank you. I also think that we're all, almost story merchants. I think it's our work to always have suitcases of alternative stories, stories that are other than the dominant ones we constantly hear, to offer to people's imagination. I just think that if I hear a story, even though the conditions are not the same, it's not best practice story, but it is a story that can open up my imagination for what it could mean, because I have the meaning making capacity for my life. And I think therefore alternative stories are also our work, merchants of imaginations, merchants of the possibilities of alternatives for the world. Thank you, Alta. Igno, funny part is that money does come from trees made of paper. Paper comes from trees. Exactly, it is. For me, that is the best wizardry act that we ever did, that we have come to agree about money and its volatility. Woo, the rand is this today. Because the markets are so emotional. I'm like, what? I think one day we'll have to explain this to our great-grandchildren. How did we do this? It's amazing. Yeah, thank you. Anyone else? Alice.
Chene, yes, the mother tongue that opens up a whole new world. I have a lot of clients of color, and there is so many financial terms that they don't even have a word for. That is sometimes very difficult for them to understand, and also with all the compliance that they have to do because they want to do one thing. So the mother tongue is definitely a very, very, very good field to explore when you actually do financial planning with cultures that does not have words for some of the financial planning industry or in the financial planning industry. I also enjoyed the word "the" because it's like saying etc., 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 or whatever. So the word "the" can mean so much. That one small word. And what I also enjoyed is the dominant stories, to actually go and do self-coaching to see what is your dominant story, so that you're not biased when you sit with a client to do financial planning. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Yes, and I think because you are in such a powerful position, I mean, you're just what you're doing comes with a whole bunch of power, and therefore to know your own relationship to the histories of financial stories in your family and your culture also, so that they don't jump into our conversation. Alice, and I'm also thinking if clients are the experts of their lives and they can express themselves in their mother tongue, it would be amazing to have to build a lexicon among you as practitioners to say, well, my client suggested this word in isiXhosa or that word in Zulu for this. You know, you could have your own chart of words that help people to enter these financial concepts. To relate it to a therapy example, so there would be young children coming to see Michael White about ADHD. Everybody knows what that is, huh? Attention deficit disorder. And they would come in, and the parents would be very excited because Michael would solve this problem. And then he said, well, all that he's ever learned about ADHD, he has learned from the children that has come to visit him. And so he has a whole list of variants of ADHD in people's unique experiences of it. And so I think you have the power to hold a lexicon, a list of, well, I've had other clients say this word in Zulu helps them, or that word in isiXhosa helps them. But I don't know if that's useful to you. Do you have another word to add? And I think in that way, people can enter this weird world, especially if they don't have language for it. Yeah, Alice.
That's a wonderful idea. Thank you, Chene.
Thank you. Louis, I saw you unmuting.
Thank you, Chene. You have a wonderful way of painting a picture with your words. And it's wonderful to listen to you, especially the words you used, gorgeous, transporting questions. That was so nice to hear. And I think what struck me is that it sounds like it's a good thing to almost hold onto these moments not too tightly, and to get your clients to hold them slightly more lightly.
Mm-hmm. Especially the problem moments. Hey, we want them to hang on to the moments they want more of. They can indulge in them because that creates a context from where they can know what they have going against problem stories. So the stories we want more of is like a well where we can draw from. So you know, if dominant problem stories have come to take, well, that would be their expressions of it, to take over their life. It's my whole life. It's been there since birth. You know, I was born like that. And that's a typical strategy of problem stories, to want people to believe that they've always been there, they've always been equally strong, and they will never leave. But there are always these other moments. And there's is the blower messing with the sound? You're not hearing. If the blower worries you, just tell me. I'll ask Simon to take a rest. I think it's almost like hypnotized to see him work with a blower. All right. So I think one of the conversations, you know, if you have a client coming in and they're like, the problem story is everywhere, you can just see it in their body. It's like, it's in the room. Then you can go to the wonderfulnesses conversation. If problem stories are so overwhelming, we have to put some ground under people's feet. So that they feel they have something going for them against problem stories. So we have to have a place of identity that they can draw from to help them understand an alternative way of their finances. So the wonderfulness conversation has two questions. If we were washed on a deserted island, the two of us, what would I come to respect of you? Can you hear the sneakiness of the question? I'm not saying, tell me please, what are you good at? You won't get a response, darling. Not at all, not in this life. So you go the other way and you say, what would I come to respect of you? That's the one question. The second question, what would I depend on you for over time? So what would I respect of you, and what would I come to depend on you for? And then people start to list their exotic capabilities, their strengths, their all of the stuff that they can do. And from that place, you can say, interesting. So if all of that is possible, what can we use to walk over the bridge to finances with? If we have this going for us, these things, what do they say? These things that you stand on, what can they tell us can be another way to work with or live with or change the relationship to finances? I don't know if that was useful. And it's from Narrative Therapy in Wonderland for Children. Because what David Epstein, who is still alive, says is that children don't have certificates like you, coaching ontological certificates or a doctor's degree or whatever. So what do they have going for them apart from their imaginations? And I think sometimes in people's relationship to finances, you have to draw on the imagination on a deserted island to help us reconnect with stories we want more of, and people's imaginative know-hows. Yeah. Any other curiosities? Yeah, whether money from ABBA, I think like never before. Sorry, Marguerite. Like never before, and COVID has taught us that people are realizing that they don't need all of that. Just because they were locked up for a while and they could see again, what is it that I really need? And so I think you have this opening in time to have conversations that I don't think we would have otherwise had, was it not for COVID. Yeah, sorry, Marguerite, you have a question or a reflection.
I found your opening slide with the X's and the single red line very, very powerful, because if that red line connected any of the other X's, the story would have been completely different.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's our work. And not to say, woo, this moment, you know, fantastic. The moment you do that, you shut the possibility for people to choose for themselves if that moment is. They must feel they have the pen in their hands when they say, yes, I also think that moment could be a clue. And when you have that, you can go for it. But I think we are sometimes so over enthusiastic when we hear something different than the red line. We just want to go for it. Yes, Robin, do you have?
I wanted to, on Marguerite's point, when we were looking at the X's joining, to me, it was like a brain. So I'm assuming that all of those stories create neural pathways. So when we're working with our clients and we're helping them change their own stories, we're actually helping them change the neural pathways in their brains, and they will tell themselves more positive stories because now the pathways are. So it'll become easier to connect with the positive story as opposed to the problem stories.
Yes, Robin. And in language, therefore I use, and I'm still working the language morph all the time. I think Hendrik, you most probably would hopefully hear some new expressions of the ideas in language. But you know, if we just think culturally, what is the water of positive and negative stories? Can you hear the, ooh, this is a positive story? Oh, I was in a conversation the other day and I said some of the stuff that I'm working with is, you know, the freedom of growing your own food and what that ripples out in a financial system and a GDP world. And this person said, oh, that's so naive. So we have naive, we have positive, we are negative stories. We have such descriptions of stories that sometimes in a larger context diminish the story. And so therefore I chose in my language stories, we want more of stories that's life-giving, can also be another expression of the story. Then we don't go in the good and bad or right and wrong or positive and negative, because there's a whole world that opens up. Robin, not as a critique, but that's just what I've experienced. You immediately go, that's not realistic, or that's not that. But if you say this is a story or a relationship to money that I want more of, there's no judgment in it. It just opens up a little bit. Yeah. Any other curiosity? And I do believe that we create new pathways with this approach. I always think that when people come to see me, I would love to remember to take a photograph of what they look like, because they move, they shift bodily. When those when those alternative meanings can be woven into their stories, and it shines a light on a life that is more complete than what the dominant problem story want to tell them about their identity. They shift bodily. They look different when they walk out the room. I'm sure you've experienced that. And I mean, what a gift, what a wonderful thing to call this work. You know, I'm so sad we have to exchange money for it, because, you know, I would really love to just be able to do the work and not the math. but that's my little story about it. Yeah. Any other reflections? We've got 6 minutes left. Hendrik, what would be most meaningful at the end? Oh, and then I also use reflecting questions. Maybe that's a good end. The kinds of reflection questions I use are mostly created by Michael White, and they sound like, what struck you in this conversation? What sparked your imagination? What brought fascination? What surprised you? Where did the conversation, can you hear that I'm externalizing the conversation? I'm saying, where did the conversation take you? Or our time together take you? What did the conversation do to you? So there's no, was I a good financial planner or not? You know, it is, we have co-constructed a conversation together, where you brought moments and experiences and I brought some expertise and questions, and we made it up together. And therefore the conversation is in the middle of the two of us. And it's not, was it a good conversation? And then we get into analysis. I wish we'd spoken more about that. Or I wasn't this, or I wasn't that. And especially if the problem story are shouting in the ears, that's how analysis questions would end. So what struck you, what sparked your imagination when the person comes again, what stayed with you from our previous conversation, where did this time together take you? Those are all kinds of questions that what they do, and especially if people been to a moment, and you then, I call it the lemniscaat, is the figure 8, that you go and take me to a moment that you would want more of, and then we go to meaning. Where did this moment take you? What did this moment teach you about your life? Can you hear we're externalizing the moment? And then that person say, I totally forgot, I value community, whatever. And then you say, wow, that's fascinating. Take me to a moment. So you could be in the loop forever, hey? Sometimes you have to just close the conversation, but then you can go again. Take me to a moment that would understand when community became so important to you. And we go there, stay a little bit longer, then we can go back to meaning. So sometimes if you're at a loss for questions, you can just step into the loop of moments and meaning. So what struck you in this conversation, for those that, I don't know, everybody's spoken already, what struck you in this conversation, where did this conversation take you, would be appropriate. What gifts did you receive? Oh, 3 minutes left. Okay.
You can
gifts.
Go a little bit over.
I'll go to gifts quickly. So we, at the end, we usually give affirmations or feedback or positive judgment, huh? Opbouwende kritiek. What the hell? Anyway, how did we come to that? But we give gifts, and gifts are the offerings of my moved heart, my moved imagination, my moved thinking, my moved actions. So when I listen to you, how have I been touched or moved by your questions, by your reflections? So I'm going to give you a gift now. So at the end of every session, I always give the gift. So that's also a stance of listening, hey? That I'm listening to you in a way that I'm willing to be moved, to be touched, to be sparked in my imagination, just to do something differently myself. People are almost like fall off their chairs. What? You're the financial planner, you learned something from me? And that is the point, that people become fascinated with their own practices. And that would give them the oomph to do some more, whatever that is for them. So the gift that I received from you today is multiple, because I've been on this path with a vegetable garden in the last year. So when COVID came, my financial planning was start a vegetable garden. All my work was cancelled. And I was like, oh, shit. Well, at least we'll eat. But I didn't have green fingers. Now that dominant story, red line, thick, nothing, when somebody gave me a plant for Mother Day, I would die. I was like, don't come and visit me again because you won't find this plant here. That was my dominant story about gardening. And then COVID came and said, well, so my husband nearly fell off the chair. I was in isolation. I just came back from Belgium and said, buy the seeds, buy the, and he was like, buy what? Because he knows my dominant story about gardening. A year later, I'm eating out of the garden. I'm sharing the abundance of a garden. And I'm also giving back to the soil. And so all of a sudden, my whole relatedness to finance, to money, to the economic system is in constant questioning. And to be with you was a gift, because it brought all of those reflections when my fingers were in the ground, closer to the surface, and with much appreciation for people like you out there that have to navigate this interesting world and finances and what that all means. And yeah, so I would love to learn what you are discovering in the kinds of conversations as compared to another time in the world. What was the financial planning conversation like then? What is it now? How is it different? How is it the same? Yeah, so this just sparked my imagination to be with you. Thank you so much for the gift, Hendrik. And I think that'll be my final sentence, and people can still speak if they want to. I'm not sure how busy people are.
Yeah. So whoever needs to drop off can drop off. If there's some of you that can stay on, it will be nice and to hear. And if you can share your gift from today with us, and whoever wants to go can go and share your gifts that you took from today and from Chene. So yeah.
Yeah, so for me, again, it's just, and you so often see this and hear this, but today, again, it was like holding up the mirror. It's people become their stories. And sometimes they just need a hand to shift that story. They just need to be reminded, because they get so caught up. And especially during COVID, I saw this a lot. People bought into all the negative press. It was like they got addicted to having to have this almost negative information the whole time, because now it was feeding their negative narrative. If things were bad for them and it was bad for the whole world, then, that story of, yeah, we're all in the same ship. No, you're not. You're actually just in the same ocean. So it was very interesting. And like things where I started saying, well, there's a negativity fast in the house. So like on Mondays, there was not allowed to be any negative talk. If you had something negative to say, go say it to someone else. I'm not interested. And how that then would shift the conversation and just the mindset. And like, oh, okay, well, we get to Tuesday, and Monday was actually nice. Of course, there wasn't negativity. Maybe we should have more of that. So yeah, people do buy into their own stories, and they don't realize that it's just stories. You can actually change it. So again, such a wonderful gift. and I tend to forget that because as Hendrik knows, I'm more into figures and data, and I stay clear of the stories because stories come with emotion. So I like figures. It's black and white. I sit in a dark corner. I do sums all day long and I don't deal with emotions. It works for me. But yeah, the stories are always underpinned by emotions. So yeah, always interesting to be reminded of this. Thanks so much for your time. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Renate.
I just want to say thank you very much. I've got to rush to a meeting, but that was so powerful, Chene. The way that you speak, the words that you use, and there's so much thought and deliberation that would have had to happen in order to be able to speak like that and change the way that you communicate. And that was beautiful. And the way you took us on this journey with your words, to be able to bring that into our practice is going to be very powerful. We're going to have to do a lot of work, but that was, wow. Thank you. Thank you for your energy as well. It was incredible.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Susan.
Bye.
Chene, we often speak about being stuck in our stories, and a friend of mine who works with a newspaper told me the story. Says one of their writers had written a series, a short story in series, and the main protagonist of the story got stuck in this big hole, and it was up all the way 10 meters up, and it was straight and everything. And the author was out on holiday and lost all kind of connections, so someone else had to complete the story, and they had no way. They were all stuck as to how the hell do we get this protagonist out of this big hole. And eventually no one could think of a logical way, and luckily about 20 minutes before the paper had to go live and go to the presses, they found the guy. They got hold of the original author, and they said, well, what can we do? And he gave them this sentence. He says, with one giant incredible leap, he leapt out and landed on the outside of the dog pit. And that's as simple as it is to get out of stuckness in a story. It's just one giant incredible leap and boom, out of it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that story.
Chene, thanks for the session. I really appreciate your time and your energy. I love your energy. It comes from a place of love and understanding, and no judgment, which is great. What I took away and the gift that I got today was really, imagination, the word of imagination. Because the moment we change our stories and the meaning that we give to our stories, and we move forward, we never look back. And I think a lot of people, they always hold back with their trauma and their stories, and especially in finances as well. That's what's keeping them stuck, is the stories that they tell them and the meaning that they give in the past. And if they can create that new story and the new imagination of what's possible, from a place of love and understanding and no judgment. I think, and the imagination part is very grounded for me. So it's really is how do we move people into the future to say, without the fears of the past, how do we move into in the future with imagination? And as you mentioned, the financial industry is changing, the world is changing, the way we navigate finances is changing, everything is changing. And we can control nothing anymore. And if we can control nothing, what is left, is just to build new stories every single day of love, caring, and sharing our gifts with the world. Yeah, so imagination was really, and, move to the future.
Thank you. Thank you.
I would like to thank you again, Chene, for also again your energy and your love and Yes, I also wish I could do everything I do for nothing, no money. And then I don't think we use reflection enough. So your gift today is definitely just a reminder to use reflection more for myself and for my clients, families and friends. And I have, my saying is, you are what you think. That for me is important, has been important through this whole COVID debacle that we had, is you are what you think. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Alice.
I'll go next and say thank you. It's been such a beautiful journey, and the gift I'm getting is affirmation that we're focusing on. And I want to use the word right, and I can't find a better word for that, but like the most impactful thing versus only focusing on the numbers to help our clients. So thank you.
Thank you, Miriam.
I'm not sure if everyone's gone yet, but I'm just very grateful to you, Chene, and to Hendrik. As I've said, I'm not a planner, but I'm just grateful that there are all of these incredible human beings with these incredible ideas that are active and moving in a financial services industry that I'm seeing more and more change in. So I'm just grateful for all of you in the room. Thank you for the work you do.
Thank you, Robin. Is the tribe spoken? Thank you. Hendrik, over to you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so thanks, Chene. What came up for me again, and the gift again today, was way back when we journeyed together 2012. You gave me an article, and I don't know who was the author of it, of that there's actually enough in the world, and that we create our own shortages in the world. And I was reading Soul of Money by Lynn Twist again the past month, and again just looking at it and the things that we place value on, and the one thing that she also talks about, the story of abundance versus scarcity. And the scarcity, one of the scarcity things is there's not enough, and the thing that struck me was not just the story of there's not enough money. It's also things that we say there's not enough time. There's not enough time for us to make time for each other, etc. So for me, again, just the gift of you making time for us, and that we could, and everybody on the call making time for each other and sharing with each other, was so valuable for me. So thank you for that and sharing that. And it was lovely engaging with everybody of everybody on the call and just learning. And yeah, so it was wonderful. Thank you very much, and for your time also, and the gift that you gave us to get again. So yeah.